do you have an anecdote to tell us about the worst or most surprising bedbug infestation you've encountered? I still very distinctly remember the worst infestation I ever went to. It was in what we call a small bedsit, which is just basically a small room in a house. This room probably measured only about 3 by 4 metres and was actually in a house in the very famous Sydney suburb of Bondi. In this tiny space, there would have had to been over 300,000 bed bugs. They were literally everywhere. They covered the bed, they were in the bookshelves, they were in the clothing, they were on the ceiling, they were everywhere. And even when I left the infestation, I was just covered in bed bugs. I had to go out of the street and basically strip off and change my clothes. So fortunately the police didn't come past, I might have got arrested. And it's quite extraordinary to see this infestation. I do have a lot of photographs of it, but underneath the end of the bed, underneath the end of the bed, the bodies of the insects formed a mass grave of around 1 centimetre thick. Sadly, the occupant had cognitive issues and was not aware that bed bugs were present. And there's no doubt he would have been quite anemic from the bed bugs, and he was at risk of death from bed bug bites. Too many bed bugs, you can lose too much blood and go into shock. Perhaps one of the things that made me really angry about this was his so-called carer, who said to us there were no bed bugs there 5 months earlier, which was complete and utter crap, a complete lie. He was a scumbag. We had no option but to throw out all the belongings. All were replaced. Everything was heavily stained. Everything was heavily infested with bed bugs. And the occupant was moved to a new premise. Once all items were removed, the room was stripped out, the skirting boards were removed, and there was a few bed bugs left, and it was quite easy to control them. Really, there was nowhere bed bugs to hide. One of the most interesting locations I've undertaken infestation was only in the last couple of weeks, where there were reports of staff on aircraft being bitten by bed bugs. And this was on a long-haul international aircraft from the US. And staff were complaining of being bitten within the staff quarters. And it's quite fascinating to look at these areas if you've never actually been on them on aircraft. And so we undertook quite extensive investigations on these aircraft, looking both at the staff quarters and many of the passenger seats. But we found no evidence of bed bugs, and we think that probably staff were being bitten probably in the hotel they stayed at prior to flying home from the US. And I have to admit, bed bug control in aviation presents a huge challenge. And there is actually a chapter on this in our bedbug book, and I do recommend reading this chapter. It's really very interesting. This was done by Adam and Catherine Jewson.